On tax incentives for affordable rental housing, focusing in different approaches in comparative law. The presentation is structured in 5 parts. First, I will briefly describe the context and key trends in tax incentivized affordable housing. Second, I will present the United States experience with the low-income housing tax credit. Third, I will explain the French pilot scheme and how it combines tax relief with rent conditions. Fourth, I will look at the German model based on special depreciation allowances for affordable housing investments. Finally, I will suggest some preliminary policy recommendations based on the comparative analysis. In recent years, housing affordability has become a major challenge in many countries. At the same time, development and land costs are rising fast. Governments are responding by shifting from traditional public subsidies to tax-based incentives. Today, institutional investors play a growing role in the production of affordable rental housing. These policies do not focus on social housing or on subsidies for tenants. Instead, they support private developers to provide affordable units. Housing is also seen more and more as a financial asset. Investors are guided by returns, tax advantages, and risk management. In this context, public-private partnerships are key. They help combine public needs and private goals. Tax-based strategies are replacing direct support, like public constructions. These schemes are flexible, but the long-term effects are still uncertain. In some cases, rent control is required to access tax benefits. This connection between fiscal policy and rent regulation is one of the aspects I will explore in this presentation. Let me now turn to the US low-income housing tax credit. Created by 1986 Tax Reform Act, it remains the main federal program for the affordable rental housing development. It offers tax credit to private investors who build or rehabilitate affordable housing. Its success is also linked to the Community Reinvestment Act, which encourages banks to support these projects in low-income areas where they operate. Now, let me briefly explain how the program works. Tax credits are not given automatically. They are awarded through a competitive process managed by state housing agencies. At least 10% of the credit are set aside for non-profit developers to encourage community-based initiatives. There are 2 types of tax credit: the 9% credit, which supports new construction or major rehabilitation projects, and the 4% credit used for moderate rehab or property acquisitions. One important feature is that credits are granted upfront before the construction begins, making them a strong financial incentive for developers. This reduces the amount of debt needed to finance the project, which in turn helps keep rents lower for tenants. In terms of eligibility, tenants must have incomes at or below 80% of the area median income, but the project's average must stay at or below 60% of area median income. Finally, there is a rent cap. Tenants cannot pay more than 30% of their income, based on 50 to 60% of the area's median income. Private investments play a central role in this model. Developers sell tax credit to private investors in exchange for equity, which reduces project debt and strengthens the capital structure. Investors receive returns mainly through tax benefits and sometimes through a share of the sales proceeds. Developers act as general partners and manage the projects. However, one key challenge is that tax credit alone rarely covers the full development cost, so additional financing is often needed. This project must comply with rent and occupancy limits based on the area median income for at least 15 years. But compliance isn't only about affordability. Maintaining property quality is also essential. After the initial period, an extended affordability phase of another 15 years often applies, and some states go beyond that. At year 15, private investors usually exit, and non-profit organizations take over. This program often directs affordable housing development to lower rent areas, where opportunity costs are lower and land is more accessible. These locations are more attractive to developers. Over time, these projects can have a positive community impact by attracting higher income residents, increasing local spending, and improving overall neighborhood living standards. Despite its strengths, the program has several important limitations. First, the credit value is fixed and does not adjust over time to reflect rising construction costs or change in tenant incomes. Also, a portion of the credit is often used to cover syndication and development fees, reducing the funds available for actual construction. The program does not always reach the lowest income households. In many cases, projects are concentrated in low-cost, economically disadvantaged areas where housing demand may be weaker. This location pattern can reduce long-term benefit for residents. Finally, there is a concern that the program may unintentionally reinforce patterns of racial and economic segregation, especially in neighborhoods that already face structural disadvantages. The program is a strong example of a public-private partnership. It brings together public resources and private capital, offering both flexibility and scale. This model allows for broader investment while maintaining public goals like affordability and long-term compliance. The program is the main federal tool for supporting affordable rental housing in the US. Since its launch, it has helped build over 3 million affordable homes across the country, showing its strategic importance in housing policy. The pioneer scheme was introduced in 2014 by Housing Minister Sylvia Kleiner, replacing the earlier Dufond program. It aimed at creating a more flexible tax incentive to attract private investment in new residential rental housing. The program focuses on addressing housing shortages in high-demand urban areas. The pilot scheme officially ended for new investment this last December. However, tax benefits still applies to eligible investment that were made before that date and continue to follow the program's conditions. The pilot scheme applies to new or under construction apartments in multi-units building. properties must be located in designated high-pressure housing zones, zones A, ABs, or B1. Since January 2021, detached houses are no longer eligible. To qualify for the pilot scheme, several conditions must be met. The property must be rented for at least 6, 9, or 12 years at below market rent levels. Tenants must meet income eligibility thresholds, and the unit must be rented unfurnished. Energy efficiency standards also apply. If the tenant leaves, the property must be relet within 12 months with evidence of active effort to avoid extended vacancy. The final scheme offers a direct income tax reduction based on the property purchase price. 12% for a 6-year rental commitment, 18% for 9 years, and 21% for 12 years. The maximum eligible investment is 300,000 euros per property and 5,500 per square meter. The tax reduction is applied annually throughout the rental commitment period. Non-compliance with penal scheme conditions can lead to the loss of tax benefits. Penalties apply if the required rental period is not respected, or if rent levels or tenant income are exceeded. Tax relief is also revoked if the property is sold, donated even in bare ownership, or used by the owner. Finally, a vacancy longer than 12 months without sufficient proof of relating effort can also trigger penalties. Let's look at a practical example of how the panel scheme works. An investor buys a new apartment in an eligible zone for 200,000 euros and agrees to rent it for 9 years under penal conditions. This generates an 18% tax reduction. That's 36,000 euros total spread over 9 years, meaning 4,000 euros per year is deducted from income tax. If all conditions are respected, rental period, rent limits, tenant income, and energy standards, the investors receive the full benefit. Germany's special depreciation allowances was enacted at 4th of August 2019. It's legally codified in the German Income Tax Act and aims to boost affordable rental housing construction. The measure was designed to stimulate new rental housing construction, promote a long-term supply of affordable units, and provide tax-based investment incentive to encourage private sector involvement in the housing markets. The core tax benefits is a special depreciation allowance, 5% per year for the first 4 years, totaling 20%. This is in addition to the standard straight-line depreciation of 2% per year. As a result, investors can deduct up to 32% of eligible construction costs in the early years, offering a strong upfront tax relief to support project viability. The special depreciation applies only to newly constructed residential rental buildings. Each unit must have at least 20 square meters and comply with Efficient House 40 and energy efficiency standards or an equivalent. The program sets limits of eligible construction cost per housing unit. The threshold was originally 3,000 euros per square meter, raised to 4,500 in 2023 and 5,200 in 2024. However, for tax purposes, only up to 4,000 per square meter can be used as a depreciation base. The special depreciation applies to both individuals and companies investing in rental housing. Eligible projects must have received building permits on or after September 1st, 2018. However, the benefit is not available if the property is used for the owner occupation or if it's sold or reclassified before completing the required 10 years rental period. The incentive does not require rent to be set below a specific threshold. The main condition is that the property must be rented out as a residential dwelling for at least 10 years, regardless of the tenant's income or the rental price. The scheme is a supply-side incentive rather than a rent control mechanism. It promotes long-term private investment in rental housing, but does not guarantee affordability for low-income tenants, since rental prices are left to the market. Affordability is pursued indirectly, mainly through cost ceilings on eligible construction expenses and the requirement to rent the property for at least 10 years. The scheme is widely used in high-demand urban areas and serves as a key tool to de-risk rental housing investment through front-loaded tax relief. Sorry, I have done something. Oh. The comparative experience shows that strong regulatory frameworks are essential. Clear rules are needed on key aspects like tenure, duration, rent ceilings, and obligation for private investors. Without this regulation, tax-subsidized housing may gradually shift into the open market. Tax incentives are useful, but they should not replace direct public investment in affordable housing. A key criticism of the LIHTC program in the US is that the tax credit alone cannot both expand and preserve the affordable housing stock. In contrast, direct public funding, like housing grants in France, can better address market values and provide greater stability and security for low-income households over the long term. Relying only on tax incentives, especially in countries with shrinking public housing budgets, offers a limited response to the global housing affordability crisis. Public housing programs remain essential to address the affordability rules and provide welfare protection where market-based tools fall short. As some researchers note, fiscal housing schemes do not always lead to efficient or equitable housing solutions. Many thanks.